Hello, my name is Simcha Fisher. I am a pro-life Catholic. Last Thursday, pro-life activist Abby Johnson recorded a video and put it on YouTube, and the video was titled My Biracial Boy. And in it, she talked about her adopted biracial son, who's 5 years old, and how he's likely to be treated differently by the police than her white sons, and how she's okay with that. Did you take the video down? I posted a copy of it on my site, simchafisher.com, and I also called her up to interview her about the video to make sure I understood what she was saying, and I posted a transcript of that video on my site as well. So today, I am here with a group of 4 Black Catholics who have agreed to come together and share some of their response to Abby Johnson's video and some of the things that she said in it. So thank you, everybody, for coming here today and sharing your views. Let's start out by introducing ourselves. If we could just go around the group, your name, tell us what you do, and a little bit about your involvement with the church, with the pro-life movement, whatever you'd like.
Good afternoon, Simcha. My name is Andrea, and I live in the Northeast. I am a parishioner in the Diocese of Brooklyn. I work as an administrative assistant at a college library, and I'm also a master's student in library and information science. I am a cradle Catholic with a reversion period, and I am active in the young adult scene here in New York City.
Thank you. Alessandra?
Hi, my name is Alessandra Harris, and I'm an author and blogger. I'm also a cradle Catholic. I live in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I went to my first March for Life when I was 10 years old, and just the videos of aborted babies being thrown away in a dumpster really touched my heart. And it's led me to be pro-life, not just in belief, but in my life personally. I'm a married mom with 4 kids. And I believe right now my role in the pro-life movement as a Black Catholic is to really remind people that pro-life encompasses the unborn up to a natural death, and everyone in between. And that means protecting all lives, including the Black person being killed from gun violence and those on death row.
Thank you, Alessandra.
My name is Eric Phillips. I'm from Chicago, Illinois. I've been a Catholic all my life. Baptized Catholic. I'd say around the age of, I'm 33 now, but I'd say around the age of 25, 26, I embarked on an adventure to really study my faith. Prior to that, I had really no idea what my faith was about. So in that journey, I fell in love with my faith. Since that time, I've done some things with the church. I'm a member of the Society of St. Vincent de Paul, for one. Two, I work with the Archdiocese. I don't work for the Archdiocese of Chicago, but I work with some members of the Archdiocese of Chicago when it comes to respect of life ministry. And they do a lot of talks around in theology of the body. There's St. John Paul's, I guess, long explanation as to who we are as human beings from the moment of conception onward. So I've done that, and I've learned a lot from the people I've met, and I'm always looking to learn more and grow in my faith.
Thank you, Eric. Marcia.
Hi, my name is Marcia Ling McGee. I am also from Chicago, Illinois, born and raised, Northsider. I am actually a convert to the church. I became Catholic in the year 2000. I was 20 years old, so this year was my 20-year Catholic anniversary. It was very exciting. And the Catholic Church has been a huge part of my life and a huge part of making great decisions for my faith and for my future. I became involved in the pro-life movement about 1 year after my son was born. I am a birth mom to a Black child, obviously, because I'm a whole Black person, and in a transracial adoption, actually. And I used to be in youth ministry. Currently, I am not in any active church ministry. I do cantor at Mass, though, but I also have a podcast with one of my best friends. It's called Plaid Skirts and Basic Black, and it's about being a Black Catholic and seeing the world through our Black Catholic lens. So I'm really excited to be here.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you all so much. I'm really excited about this conversation now. I think we could just go ahead and jump right in. I want to be fair to Abby, and I want to really, I don't want to put any words in her mouth, so we're just going to go ahead and quote her exact words. I've got some excerpts from the video, and then maybe we can just take some turns responding to them and letting people know what your response is. So she opened up by saying, I recognize, also she used her son's name in the video, and I'm not going to do that. I recognize that I'm going to have a different conversation with my son than I do with my brown-haired little Irish, very, very pale-skinned white sons as they grow up. Because right now, my son is an adorable, perpetually tan-looking little brown boy. But one day, he's going to grow up and he's going to be a tall, probably sort of large, intimidating-looking, maybe, brown man. And my other boys are probably going to look like nerdy white guys. So she's got predictions about how her kids are going to look when they grow up. Eric, is that something you'd like to respond to?
Yes, thank you for the question. I'm sure her children are beautiful, right? Just because her children are white, she don't have to call them nerdy, you know. And regarding her son, the one that's tan, I mean, obviously I'm a black man. You know, it's kind of sometimes kind of hard to put this in words, but at a young age, I kind of understood what the stereotype for black people were, particularly black males, which is lawless, brutes, sexually promiscuous, and whatnot. But like I said, that's a stereotype. As I got older, myself included, I can tell you, just because you come from a certain area does not mean you're going to turn out like those people in that area. Just because you come from a well-to-do area doesn't mean you're going to turn out to be an outstanding individual as well. So when it comes to her son, I'm not son's daddy. I don't have any kids of my own, but I would hope that she has a conversation with her son. And in that conversation, I would hope that she would express the possibility or the reality that, you know, not everybody's going to look at you as being intimidating. You don't have to be intimidating just because you're black or just because you're tanner than the next person. I would hope that the conversation she has with him is that, you know, have good character about yourself. Be honest, be straightforward, do good work. Because as a black individual, and her son being a tan individual, he has a certain, like one of my bosses said way back when I used to work for a particular company. I was going to say the name, but don't worry about the name. You know, my bosses always tell me, Eric, you black, you have to bring the full pie. You can't bring half the pie. And so I hope this conversation she had with her son is that he will always have to put his best foot forward, because there'll be people out there that would think that the position he's in, he didn't earn it. It was given to him, or soon enough he'll do something wrong and it won't be his no more. She has to, her and her husband or whoever has to help build his psychology, not just the psychology that says you can do X, Y, and Z, but who you are, right? We as Catholics, you're made in the image and likeness of God, but your color of your skin, no matter what society throws at you, is not your limit, regardless of whether somebody's intimidated by you or not. And if they are intimidated by you without them knowing you, that's not your problem, that's their problem. All right, something's wrong with the way they think. So I hope that, and so as I look at those comments, I think, and I have no ill will against the woman. I don't know her, but those are my view, very ignorant comments to make. And one day her son may see that video, and who knows what effect that might have. But I'm confident the young man will grow up to be nerves of steel and iron, and I'm sure he'll grow up to be a very nice, well-to-do young man. But don't do everything you can, Ms. Johnson, to not have this mentality thinking that he's to be a menace to society, because that's not the case. So,
does anybody want to add anything to that before we move on to the next section? Okay, we'll move on then. The next thing that Abby says is, statistically, I look at our prison population and I see that there is a disproportionately high number of African American males in our prison population for crimes, particularly for violent crimes. So statistically, when a police officer sees a brown man like my son walking down the road, as opposed to my white nerdy kids, these police officers are going to know that statistically, my brown son is more likely to commit a violent offense over my white sons. Okay, she says. So the fact that in his head he would be more careful around my brown son than my white son, that doesn't actually make me angry. That makes the police officer smart because of statistics. Who would like to respond to this idea of statistics?
Okay, well, here's the thing. If we want to talk about statistics, Black men make up 12% of the US adult population, right? As it stands maybe 2 years ago, when statistics get done, they're always a couple years behind, but they make up 33% of the US prison population. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they are more likely to commit violent crimes. That means that, and other statistics show that Black neighborhoods, Black schools are more likely to be policed. They're policed more. So they are caught more for crimes. It doesn't say they commit more crimes. I was talking to someone else the other day about the school to prison pipeline, about how Black students are policed more even in the setting with white students, where a white student is more likely to be disciplined for a provable offense, right? Like skipping school or smoking on campus. But a Black student is more likely to be disciplined, not only for that, but also implies insubordination. So there is a bias created by the statistics, but the statistics are also biased. So it's kind of like people sometimes don't realize that these statistics they're not that they're untrue because they're numbers, it's math, but they don't take in account the fact that there are other factors that lead to Black men being incarcerated. It does not mean that they are more violent. I actually currently, I work in a residential facility. I run a home in a residential facility. I have 9 teenage boys in my care. And it's pretty much like there's Black kids and white kids, that I have in my care. It's pretty even. And all of my kids do stuff wrong. It doesn't matter. Like my Black kids lie and steal food from the pantry, and so do my white kids, right? And I catch them all, and I know that is part of where they are as teenagers, or people like living in a residential facility. I don't watch my Black kids more than my white kids. I watch them because they're teenagers, not because of their race. And I think that some white kids are given a pass. Even when we talk about marijuana convictions, Black people are more likely to get a higher drug charge, and white people are more likely to get a pass. I was telling a friend the other day, I'm like, white people are more likely to be carrying marijuana on them. Because, they have it, it's out, well, right now it's legal. But I knew from friends of mine, my white friends always knew where to get marijuana. And I was like, how do you even do this? So confusing. But Black people were hired police, so they were caught with it. So I think that the disparity is due to the significant amount of policing. But it also doesn't make the police officer smart that he is more likely to think that her son will commit a violent crime. It makes the police officer biased, instead of realizing their own bias. Like if her son, who is biracial, is walking down the street with her nerdy, quote unquote, nerdy white kids, however she wants to describe them, at the same time, it doesn't make it fair. She can't explain away that, oh yeah, the police officer approached my son first. And it could be her other sons committing, doing whatever they want to, or roughhousing and rebel rousing, all the things that teenagers do. I'm so old, it's not even funny. So when I talk about what teenagers do, so it's more likely the officer is biased, not smart, and because the statistics are against us because we don't have all the information sometimes. So,
thank you. That was a very illuminating answer. I think we'll continue, we'll just continue right on through her speech. After she says that it doesn't make her, it would make the police officer smart, it doesn't make her angry that her biracial son is more likely to be profiled. She says, what makes me angry is why? Why are the statistics the way they are? I believe that the primary reason we see a lot of the illness in our society today is because of fatherlessness, particularly in Black homes. 70% of Black homes were without fathers, she said. Eric, I think you had a response to that.
Yeah, so I think first when we start talking about people's culture, I guess we have to look at it from its wholeness, right? You gotta try to get the biggest picture we can, right? So with African American culture, it doesn't start in 1960. It doesn't start in 1960. I mean, technically, okay, birth of the nation was 1776. Okay, I mean we was here before that, but here 1776. So our culture, you can start grading our culture or looking at evaluating our culture from 1776 onward. Okay, I'm not gonna go all the way to 1776, but let's just look at post-Civil War, right? 1865 on up, and because I think, before we can get into the statistics she was talking about, I want to make sure that we as Black people know what our culture is, so we don't have to rely on another person who's looking at statistics to tell us what our culture is. That's not good. And if anybody needs to get a handle on this is us. So Thomas Sowell, who is he's an economist and a professor at Stanford University, African American man, about 90 years old. So he's got some experience. Right? He's wrote about 30 books regarding, I guess, Black family. Right? He writes. I'm going to just quote from his book. The name of his book, for anybody that cares, is The Vision of the Anointed. Right? Self-congratulation as a basis for social policy. Right? On page 104. He says, going back 100 years when Blacks were just one generation out of slavery, we find that the census data of that era showed that a slightly higher percentage of Black adults had married than had white adults. This in fact remained true in every census from 1890 to 1940. Prior to 1890, this information was not included in the census. He goes on to say that slavery has separated people, but it had not destroyed the family feelings they had for each other, much less their desire to form families after they were free. As late as 1950, 72% of all Black men and 81% of Black women had been married. But the 1960 census showed the first signs of decline that accelerated in later years. And so we get to 1960, all of a sudden things start to change for, I guess, the unity of the Black family. And I'm going to lead into it, and at a certain point, Alessandra can chime in. But so like in 1929, we experienced the Great Depression. Right? In 1935, President Roosevelt and members of Congress came up with the New Deal, and the New Deal put in place the first programs that we consider welfare. Okay, and so a lot of the states had pretty much responsibility as deciding, what were the stipulations or limits or the criteria that people had to meet in order to qualify for welfare assistance. A lot of these states enacted, I guess you could say, rules that essentially discouraged the man from being in the home. When we go from 1935 to 1960s, actually to 1964, President Lyndon Baines Johnson expanded the welfare programs, or added to the welfare programs that President Roosevelt had kind of instituted. He put a lot more money into them as well, meaning that states had a lot more money to spend, presumably on people that needed it the most. But these states and local agencies still had on the books laws that discouraged males from being in the home. For instance, there was man in the house laws, and basically, if the head of the family was getting assistance, let's say a woman, and it was known to the agency that it was only supposed to be one person there, they would conduct spontaneous visits to make sure that no man was there. And so, in response to this, a lot of participants in the program made sure, and a lot of the men themselves made sure that they weren't there, right? So they can continue getting government funding and whatnot. Laws such as that, or rules such as that, or as speaking as a man, that has a lasting effect, not just on the children and the woman, but on the man himself, knowing that he can never be there to see his children, to raise his children, to be there with his wife. And what the statistics don't capture is the psychological, emotional effects on men and children and women. That's what statistics does not capture. So we have to, statistics are really good. They're good in measuring a lot of things, but they don't capture the full picture, and we need to realize that about statistics. And what happens is you have children growing up without a father for, from infancy, but from like 5, 6, 7 into adolescence, into adulthood. Their vision of a man is being absent. And so they grew up doing exactly what their father did, which is not be there. And that kind of perpetuates a cycle. And so what I call that's not Black culture. It's not Black culture. In my opinion, it was an attack on the family, but in my opinion, I call that cultural vandalism. And I'm not saying that those people that practice this behavior are at heart, in essence, vandals. No, they made an image likeness of God. But that behavior is a vandalization, meaning that vandals, what they do, they don't create. They take what's already there and they find a way to deface it. Our culture has always been the desire for the family, right? Like a quote from the book, even after slavery, men and women wanted to get together and form families, right? That's just in our blood. And I think that's not just in our blood. I think that's just inherent within most individuals, to want to build a family, right? To have children, to raise them. So it's not correct to say our culture is one that discourages family, but there's a vandalistic mentality that has spawned from a racist outlook on Black individuals. Alessandra, do you want to chime in?
I'm gonna let Simcha move on to the next question, but I did just want to add to what you're saying about at that time in the 60s and 70s, we have to look at how communities of color were moving to more urban areas, and that's when white flight was happening. So you had people of color in communities where the money and the resources were fleeing the communities. So you had a lot of African Americans, and especially African American males, who no longer had the ability to get a job. And Black male unemployment is still the highest in the country. So you had people who were having trouble getting a job. You had schools to this day, they're completely underfunded. So it's hard to work your way up in a system when you don't even have the basics being met at your school so you can get a degree. And even to this day, Black people are more likely to have to drop out of college because of student debt and not being able to afford a college education. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about the statistics, but I'm going to let Simcha go back to the video.
So the next part of the video that she recorded, she says 70% of Black homes were without fathers. Fatherhood initiatives, their voices had really been silenced, and I started wondering why. I found out what happened, she said. There are these activists in the Black community who are trying to redefine what Black fatherhood is. Now, this is what made me angry, she says. This is what should make the Black community angry. There are studies out there that are trying to redefine Black fatherhood. The 70% number is a lie because Black fatherhood looks different from white fatherhood. That Black fatherhood actually does look like a Black man coming in and out of the home, not being a consistent presence in the home, and that vision of fatherhood is the equivalent of a white father being consistently in the home. Black fathers do not get a pass just because it is culturally different, just because Black fathers don't want to be in the home. And culturally, it has been acceptable for them to be with multiple women. that is racism, she says. But that's what is happening in research institutions right now. And I'm sorry, I just have to say, I did ask her where she read these studies and she couldn't remember. They are trying to redefine Black fatherhood because they don't like that 70% statistic. So instead of setting the bar higher for Black fathers, they are simply redefining fatherhood in the Black community. That's crap. Alessandra.
So I'm gonna only agree about one thing, that the 70% statistic is a lie, because statistically, and I'm going based on the Institute for Family Studies, which is a conservative think tank, and also if you look at the Black family statistics, they have similar numbers. 36% of Black families are headed by married parents. 8% are headed by cohabiting parents, which means 44% of Black families have a Black male in the home, and not to mention the Black single dad homes, which is about 3%. So the 70% is inaccurate, and people keep repeating that. And I hope that we can stop, because if you look at the statistics, that is incorrect. What I wanted to talk about more than the statistic is the idea that the Black Lives Matter movement and that Black people, Black activists want to redefine what the Black family is. I'm not even going to go on to the website of the Black Lives Matter. I'm not going to talk about that specifically, because the Black Lives Matter movement is more than just one organization, and it's more than just one website's mission statement. But what people are talking about is that the nuclear family of a mother, father, and kids, traditionally, the African American and African cultures believe that all the community raises a child. So not saying there's not a mom and dad. There has to be a mom and dad to have a child. But saying that the mom and the dad are important, their children are important, and so are the aunties and the uncles and the grandma and the grandpa. If you look at the African American family, to this day, data reveals there's a huge gap between the finances of Blacks and whites. In 2020, it's almost as wide as back in 1968, when the Fair Housing Act was passed, which was the response to centuries of unequal treatment of Blacks and whites in nearly every aspect of society and business. So you still see today that less than 50% of Black households own their own homes, compared to over 70% of white households. And you still see that Black people make less money and have tremendously less wealth than white families. And you still see that even a Black household headed by someone who has a college degree still has less wealth than a household headed by a white person who only has a high school diploma. So when we're talking about the nuclear family, we're saying we don't believe that in the individualistic, I'm going to pull myself up by the bootstrap and only my husband and I are going to raise this child. We believe that that's not going to work for us when we don't have that wealth, where maybe I can't afford the best education and private tutors. I'm going to need to go to the community center that offers those programs. I'm going to need to ask my sisters and my dad and my mom to help babysit my kid because I can't afford a nanny. So I feel like what we're saying is that we're trying to strengthen the Black community, strengthen the moms, strengthen the fathers, strengthen the kids, strengthen everyone around us that makes us be able to excel in this culture and in this community and around the world.
One of the things that Abby did in her video was to speak directly to Black women. I was a little bit taken aback, to be honest with you. She said, Black women, you deserve better than that. You deserve a man that will father a child with you and be in the home with you and your child. And second of all, your children deserve to have a father that is consistently in the home with their child. Black children do not deserve a lesser father simply because they are Black. And Marcia, you brought up a really interesting question when we were talking about this earlier. You said, what do you think there is to say about expectations for non-Black people adopting Black or biracial children? What do those children deserve from their adoptive parents? What would you say about that?
Well, I believe that when a child, like a Black or biracial child, is adopted by a white family, like my son was, and they just, like, basically you're filling a need and filling a void in your heart. Like, it's a two-way street, right? Basically, first thing you should be prepared to do is love this child. Just like if it were your child, your natural child, you don't know how it's going to turn out or what challenges it's going to face. But also recognizing that one of the things I made sure of when we were making an adoption plan for my son was that please don't ever say that you're colorblind. Please don't ever say, I'm colorblind, we're not racist. Because you are taking a child, when you see my Black son, which is now their Black son, so our Black son, that you are seeing that he comes with a set of challenges, that there's already, the cards are stacked against him in certain aspects, and raising that child, understanding that, knowing that it is an injustice, not accepting it. Every child deserves that. They deserve, like, especially like little Black boys deserve to know that there will be injustice and that itself is not okay, right? Like their parents, they need to be, she needed to be able to state that she was going to fight for her son's personhood and fight for justice in his life instead of accepting injustice. And I believe parents of Black and biracial children, that they should be prepared to do that. They should be prepared to fight for their children. Just like if they were going to the school board, talking to a teacher about a grade that they weren't supposed to get, or why didn't so-and-so invite them to their party, they should be prepared to go to the mat for their child every time and not just accept that's the way it is. And if you're not prepared to accept that 24/7, 365, do not adopt a child that is Black or biracial. If you're not prepared to fight that fight every day, because you will fight that fight every day, that's that's what a child deserves. A child deserves parents who love them and will fight for them. That's real. And so that's what, and that's really at the base of everything else. All the other stuff will come, right? There are conversations that need to be had. My son's dad and I, we had to kind of tag team about having that talk about racial injustice. It's an open I don't know if we talked about that. It's an open adoption that I'm in. So I get to be a part of my son's life because they're like, and at first I was like, yeah, I can be open, cards and letters, fine, whatever. And they're like, no, we're going to have a Black child. You really need to be there. And that's what they did. That's what they did to make sure to fight for him at every instance, because they weren't going to be able to recognize dog whistle racism necessarily until I brought it to their attention. They weren't going to be able to recognize injustices that he might face. And so they're like, no, you need to be here. You need to be involved. And so we did tag team and have the talk about, he just got his driver's license. So we've had the get pulled over, hands on the dashboard, all the, what I mean? All those things, because they're ready to fight for him. And I think that my son has an amazing support system because of that. And it breaks my heart to believe that any other child may not have that. And every child deserves to have a parent that will fight for them. But a child in a transracial adoption deserves to have someone who is prepared to fight for them. That's how I feel.
Okay, thank you. We have one last section from the transcript from Abby's video that I was hoping you could respond to. Toward the end, she says, if Black America wants to start rioting and talking about something, this is it. This is it. Our prisons are disproportionately filled with Black men because of this 70% statistic. Mark my words. It's not because of bad cops. It's because of bad dads. 70% of these dads are walking out on their babies. You want to end what's happening in these Black communities. Don't try to redefine Black fatherhood. The root is not with bad cops. The root starts in the home. A response.
Okay, so in regards to that statement, I think we need to go farther back, and I'm talking all the way to slavery back, because the root of separation starts when families were split apart in slavery. The master would sell the mother to one place, the master would sell the father to another place, and that cycle has perpetuated itself. It just, the way it's perpetuated itself now is that we see the mass incarceration of Black men, right? And we see that the two-sidedness of the incarceration, where a Black man is incarcerated for 20 years on a petty crime, but a white man will be let off with probation or a warning for that crime, and his records are sealed. So we have to look at that. Then we also have to look at the side where a lot of Black fathers don't even make it home to their children because they are murdered. For example, Malcolm X's father was killed when he was 5 or 6 years old, supposedly from a streetcar accident. We have Medgar Evers getting out of his car in his driveway to come home to his children. He's shot down by Byron Della Beckwith. We have Dr. King in town for a union strike. He's shot on a motel balcony. If we want to make it more relevant for our generation, I live in New York, so Sean Bell, killed on his wedding day, left behind an infant child. Who else? Let me see. We have Eric Garner, left behind 2 daughters, strangled to death. And then we have George Floyd, who broke all of our hearts when she said, you know, my dad's going to change the world. I think the most amazing thing about Black fatherhood is that through all of this, through all the struggles, through all the dichotomy in the American justice system, through all the people saying that Black men aren't good fathers, Black men are some of the best fathers we've ever had. Because when the chips are down, they've been there. When people have told us, you can only go so high, our fathers have helped us break the ceiling. Our fathers have sat at the head of our tables. Our fathers have been on television showing us that even when the world is against you, you keep going. And that is something that Ms. Johnson's statement fails to take into account.
We've gotten through most of the transcript that we have from Abby's speech. Toward the end of it, when I interviewed her, I asked her if the pro-life movement in America has a racism problem. And she thought for a minute and she said, racism exists. So I guess I'd like to ask you the same question. Do you think the pro-life movement has a racism problem?
Yes, absolutely it does. Pro-life movement, it's very clear that they only think, and I'm making a generalization, and I will fully admit that. I feel that the pro-life movement only exists, racism exists in the womb, when they want to talk about Planned Parenthoods being only in predominantly Black neighborhoods. And they're like, that's awful. But they're not thinking about how their mindsets and policies that they vote into place and the way that they continue to villainize Black fathers and Black culture don't affect our lives out of the womb. There was a video that I saw on Instagram. My sister sent it to me. People were driving home and there were there were protesters outside of a Planned Parenthood right after George Floyd was murdered. And they were saying, and their sign literally said, more George Floyds will die here tonight, like today, than on the street. And the woman was like, the what? It like, that's what she said. And she's like, it is, that's the real problem. That's what you should be upset about. It's that whataboutism that we get when we want to say Black Lives Matter, but they go, oh, but what about Planned Parenthood? What about this? They are trying to deflect, and because they don't want to deal. Well, I presume they don't want to deal with the whole person after they are born. I firmly believe that once a Black child is born, that is when we need the pro-life movement even more. Mm-hmm. We need you to vote in policies that help mothers, right? Policies that are able to like abolish those laws about the man of the house laws, and because that still exists right now, it makes more fiscal sense to not be married to the father of your children. If you are struggling in the Black community, it makes sense because you're more likely to struggle when you're married because your government benefits will be cut. That's less food stamps, that's everything. And that is frustrating. So pro-lifers aren't there for that. And I absolutely believe it's because racism exists. They already have an idea about us in the mind. Someone said to me once, and a friend of mine, and she's Black, and she's like, I don't understand why you're pro-life. And I was like, because, everyone needs to live and everyone needs to get what they need. And she goes, but it seems like pro-lifers only want us, they don't want to kill us in Planned Parenthood because they want to be able to kill us in the street, whether it's a slow death by starvation, or if it's death by cops. And the pro-life movement absolutely has a racism problem. I don't think, just like this country, the pro-life movement was not built for me as I am right now. Right? Like, America wasn't built for Black people, right? It was built by Black people, let's be real. But the pro-life movement wasn't built for Marcia at 40 years old, right? Me in the womb of my 17-year-old mom, absolutely, right? But now as I am, they don't care about my spirit or my well-being. And you know what? Here I am still fighting for life because I know it's the right thing to do.
Thank you. There's an even more discouraging question, maybe. Your thoughts on whether the Catholic Church in general has a racism problem?
Okay, so I'll preface it this way. The racism problem in the Catholic Church, it's like the house is on fire and there are people in the house that's on fire, and people outside the house are trying to say, hey, your house is on fire. But the people in the house are like, no, it's not. So the Catholic Church, the word Catholic comes from the Greek word for universal. But the American Catholic Church has grown alongside this country. We would be kidding ourselves if we said the American sector of the Catholic Church didn't have a racist problem, and I'll tell you why. Because the same people who built those institutions, those same racist institutions that believed that Black people were 3/5 of the person, they were the same people who built the Catholic Church. And they brought in those prejudices with them. They were the same people who forced Native Americans to give up their culture, change their name, attend these Indian boarding schools to rehabilitate them and make them more European. These are the same people that refused to ordain Black priests so that the Venerable Father Tolton had to go to Italy to seminary. These are the same people who denied Black nuns the opportunity to become novices in their orders, so they had to create their separate orders. The thing that makes it worse is that a lot of Catholics do not know this information because we teach the faith, but we don't teach the history. And because we don't teach the history, it perpetuates on and on and on. So the same stereotypes perpetuate on and on and on. I bet you a lot of Catholics in America do not know that the reason why there are so many Black parishes in certain dioceses is because when Black families moved to the area in places like through historical periods like the Great Migration, and they wanted to go to the neighborhood parishes, the neighborhood parishes says, we don't want any N-words in our parish. So they would send them to parishes in the Black part of town that were underfunded and ill-prepared. Then you also have the parishioners, the communities, those racist parishioners who did not want Black people at their parish. There's a reason why Malcolm X said the most segregated hour in America is 11 o'clock on a Sunday morning. And we still have that. Then nowadays we have a specific religious movement who worships in a specific form of the Mass, which is a beautiful form of the Mass, but it's built upon the idea that if you are not this, if you don't meet this condition, this condition, this condition, this condition, you're not Catholic enough. For a lot of us, I can't relate to that. I grew up in the Caribbean. We didn't have organs. Have you ever seen what happens to an organ in 95-degree weather with 100% humidity? It warps. So we've had to create our own traditions, but it doesn't make it any less Catholic. The key problem with the racism in the American Catholic Church is that it's predicated upon the idea of whiteness. And it will always have that problem unless we do something. Because guess what? The majority of the world's Catholics, they're not white.
That being the case, I mean, if this is your experience of the Catholic Church, what is it that keeps you coming back?
Thank you for the question. Simply put, what keeps me coming back? It's primarily the Eucharist. But let me say this first. I think a lot of African Americans in slave times saw the same story in the Exodus and Moses, in the ancient Egypt, and how the Hebrews, after 400 years of being enslaved, God came to their salvation. As a Catholic, it's hard. Life here in this nation is hard. As a Black Catholic, it's even harder because everything has been said already. But if you look at the story of Christ, right, it was not an easy life. He had 12 apostles. 11 of the apostles were martyred. I think when you study Scripture, you just accept the fact that being Catholic, and at the time, the Hebrews, the Jews living in the Roman Empire, they were looked down upon because of their culture. I find myself in the same situation today, but that doesn't mean I have a right to turn my back on the church that Christ founded. I have to accept this fight. I think we're all born here for a reason, not by happenstance. God willed us into existence for times like this, to fight the good fight. And fighting the good fight means suffering. But because you suffer, you don't abandon the fight. You stand the cross. You stand by the cross with Christ. That's how I approach it. So when we say what keeps me coming back, there's nowhere else for me to go. This is the
Amen.
church. Also, how do we make progress? I think Alessandra said in one of her videos, prayer and fasting. That's always where it begins, prayer and fasting, right? Then after that comes action. So before the quarantine, right, what I would do, I would go to different parishes around the city. So I'm on the south side, so I was primarily going to churches on the south side. And then I would go to predominantly white churches and whatnot because I just wanted to see how they did things there. I just want to get a feel for the community and things like that. We have to find ways to build camaraderie with one another to the point where we can start asking each other over to each other's houses. So I'm talking about people with different ethnicities and cultures, all right? So I think white parishioners should go visit a Black parish. Try to build some relationships, try to get involved in some of those ministries and vice versa, to the point where you can start inviting people over to eat and dine with. Because just like there's a theology of the body, there's also a theology of food. And I think that really helps break down ignorance. Because a lot of people I would call racist, I would call them racist, not because I think that they hate me, although there are people that hate me because of my skin. I think some are racist because they're just racially ignorant. And so I think eating with one another, doing other things with one another helps break down that ignorance. It helps us understand one another better, so that one side does not think the other side is just trying to be victim all the time. I think that's one particular way we can do that. Did you want to go into your next question? Because I can just keep talking. I can go right into it.
I guess it kind of leads into it. I was wondering if there was a time when, we've been talking about all of the problems that we have and all of the issues that you deal with. I was wondering if there was a time you could share when you really did feel like a fully seen member of the Catholic Church.
So as I was stating that I would visit certain parishes, just on a random Sunday, right, when I had time. So there's a parish, and I'm going to mention this parish name because it was a good experience for me. Saint Joseph Act. It's on the north side of Chicago. Oh yeah, yeah. Oh, it's you? Okay. So this was actually my second time there. The first time I was there, I was trying to help. I'm with another organization called the Camino Project. Long story short, we send young Catholics on a pilgrimage. So the first time I was there, I was talking to the priest. I was trying to see if they can help us out with a certain fundraiser. It fell through. But one day it came to me, you know what? That church looks very interesting. Let me attend there for Mass. Okay. So I went to Mass there, and the time came from a homily, and the priest there was a white priest. He started to talk about something that Andrea alluded to, how he used to work in the Black community. It was actually half Black, half white. And the priest went on to say how the Black people will go to Mass, but they would be treated like second citizens at the Mass. They had to sit in certain spots. They had to be the last to receive the Eucharist and whatnot. And then he went on to say that one of the Black parishioners kind of approached the priest, the head priest there, about it. And the priest rebuked her, right? Said she was being selfish and things like that. And so one day that lady just stopped going to Mass. And then he went on to explain that this is a lot of times what racism does, right? When you treat a fellow person like that, Catholic or not, you kind of help them lose their faith. And he went on to say that, so many words that we need to check ourselves as people, find out where our faults are at, repent of our faults, and do what we can to do better. Because no person, especially Catholic at Mass, should be treated like that regardless of the color of the person's skin. And so I was happy I came that day. It was just a random day. And it was not Black History Month. It was on his heart. And it was one of his experiences. His experience was hearing this woman's story of her experience. And eventually she started to go back to Mass and then to receive the Eucharist. I felt appreciated by it because I didn't think the homily was said because it was expected, right? It was just like, so Black History Month, I expect to see people so-called honoring Black history, right? But this was just totally out of the blue. And I felt appreciated because I from that point on, I knew that experience was in his heart and mind, and it changed him. And I know that wherever he's at now, he's preaching that same homily somewhere else. He might still be at St. Joseph, but I felt appreciated that day, for sure. I mean, I felt everybody was looking at me, but they weren't. I was kind of like, oh, I'm just a Black person here on this day that he says this, but no. So.
Oh, thank you for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything else that you would like to share, any of you would like to share, that you feel that your fellow Catholics, that white Catholics ought to know about the experience of being a Black Catholic?
We're in a group with hundreds of Black Catholics, and I actually posed the question to people because my experience as a Black Catholic is very different from every other Black Catholic's experience. And that's one of the things that a lot of people expressed, is that there's Black Catholics spanning the continents. There's Black Catholics all over the place, and we all worship differently and have different traditions. But we all have a relationship with Jesus Christ, and we believe in the Eucharist, and we believe in the church. So even though we all have different experiences and different traditions and different ways we worship in different parishes, that we all want to be seen as the body of Christ, and that we all want to be recognized as being made in the image and likeness of God. But with that being said, like Marcia had said earlier, people want to have white Catholics see their Blackness. And as a writer in fiction, the default is white. So unless you say this character has brown skin, you're going to assume that that character is white. So too, if you say, I don't see color, you're defaulting to the white experience. So when we say we're Black Catholic, it doesn't take away our Catholicism at all, but it acknowledges our culture and our traditions and our skin color and everything that that encompasses.
I'm wondering if I should rephrase my final question in light of what you just said, but I'm just going to go ahead and ask it, and you can change my question and answer a different question if you'd rather. Is there anything that you would like to ask for from white Catholics in particular? Understanding, of course, that white Catholics are not a monolith any more than Black Catholics are. Is there something that you would request or that you would hope for?
Actually, I just talked to someone about this recently, where just say welcome when we walk into your parish. Don't make me earn my spot there. And I feel that, so I sing at church. I'm a cantor at the masses here at church, and I have a very pretty singing voice. That's a fact. It's not like, oh, I'm so great. But I know that if I want to feel welcome in a church, all I have to do is sit next to an old white lady and sing out of the hymnal. And then someone will talk to me at the sign of peace. And then if I don't, it's an awkward. I feel that not making me earn my spot in the church is a huge way to actually welcome me in the church, because guess what? I've been a member of this church for 20 years. I'm here, whether you welcome me into this building or not. And I think just saying, hey, welcome, don't tokenize me. And it's funny how, Eric, you mentioned St. Josephat. So I used to live in Lincoln Park. I lived in Lincoln Park neighborhood in Chicago for about 5 years. And St. Josephat was where I went to Mass on Sunday nights, like Sunday nights, pretty much. And that's where I really enjoyed the Mass there. And I enjoyed it so much there because I was welcome right away all the time. And I didn't realize that's what it was until I started going to Mass at other places, where I would walk in, they would say, welcome. I would get this. Do you want to bring up the gifts? Absolutely. And then one day, I don't know, it was the usher or someone heard me sing, and he's like, oh my gosh, I have been trying to figure out how to get you to come back here more times. And now you just need to come join the choir. That's how we get you to come back here. And I just thought it was that they were already, like, they wanted me there. I always felt like I was wanted there. Like, seriously, it's just saying welcome. Like, I know that sounds so crazy because you're like, whatever, we're Catholic, we welcome everyone. That is not true. When I feel like I am like in an exhibit whenever I come to Mass, people always kind of watch to make sure I know what to do. I had someone in Mass tell me, now, honey, this is where we stand. And I'm like, I know, I'm a legit a whole catechist. I'm a youth minister. Like, I know what I'm supposed to do. And people with the small Catholic microaggressions, wow, you knew everything. And I'm like, I am Catholic. I grew up in Chicago, where if you want a good education, you're more likely to go to Catholic school. So I knew this before I became Catholic. And so just treating us like any other Catholic, but also acknowledging our Blackness in that moment, knowing that just like you would a Black person, acknowledging that their skin comes with stuff, right? Our skin comes with baggage, but we're here to share the faith with you. So I feel that sometimes, like, there's that song that says we are one body in Christ, but we do not stand alone. And I feel sometimes as a Black Catholic, I know that we're one body in Christ, but I often feel that I am standing alone when I enter a predominantly white Catholic space. Even I was a youth minister in a moderately sized town in Indiana for about 3 years. And the first weekend that I was in church there, I did not feel welcome. And I even was asked to, they were one Eucharistic minister short, because I was going to introduce myself at all the Masses. And I was like, oh, I can do it. It's fine. Just tell me where to stand. I can give them a cup. Where there was an older couple, and they looked at me like they were suspect. Like the woman, like the man just kind of like looked at me like, whoa, who are you with this cup? Right? They didn't have to know anyone else at this Mass, because it's Catholic Church. You don't know everybody who goes there. But they saw me, and the wife went to go up to get the cup, and I was ready, and he yanked her back and just gave me this look, and then they went back to their pew. And I was like, well, I'm so glad I'm here to minister to all of the racist kids. No, but they weren't all. They were really, it turned out to be a really fantastic experience, but I will never forget that day. I will never forget that Saturday night mass when, even though he didn't know anyone else who was a Eucharistic minister, they definitely, I don't know what they thought I did to the church wine. I mean, I was really upset because I was like, I'm gonna have to finish this nasty wine, but that's really what happened. I had to finish. Church wine is gross, y'all, but that's what it was. I don't feel welcome until I earn my spot, and I shouldn't have to earn my welcome in a Catholic church. It's a Catholic church.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you so very much for sharing your time and your experiences, and I'm hoping that this is a beginning of conversations for people, and not just that people will listen to it and try and really hear what you're saying, but that it will spark some more conversations in our homes and also in our parishes. All right, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay.